Be wary of spoilers for the following. In this world, is the destiny of mankind controlled by some transcendental entity or law? Is it like the hand of God hovering above? At least it is true that man has no control even over his own will. Berserk. It was my first introduction to dark fantasy, showing the intricacies of character motivations and the interpersonal dynamics of how characters clash or get along. Sometimes to have truly high peaks, you need some very deep valleys to go with, meaning that even if a show has plenty of action or combat, the scene that sticks with you the most may actually be quite small. With that said, let's talk about the journey of Guts. While the overall story centers around a trio of characters, the true main character is undeniably Guts himself. In the first episode, he's introduced as the Black Swordsman, who's on a quest of revenge against beings known as apostles. But then we get a flashback of the true story of this anime, the Golden Age arc, where we see Guts' life story, from how he got his name to the purpose of his revenge. A quick side note, while the anime is based off of the manga, it did cut a few of the overt details. So while the anime implies certain things, the manga has the full story. So while we're talking about the anime today, I'll also allude a bit more thoroughly to what else happened, starting with Guts' name. Simply put, he was named after the pile he was found in, below the body of his mother who was hanging from a tree in a raided village. Definitely putting the dark in dark fantasy here. But moving on to his childhood, he was found by a woman by the name of Shisu, who was the wife of a mercenary captain called Gambino. But due to Shisu dying shortly after finding Guts, Gambino still raised him, but in turn took his anger out on Guts through both beatings and taking money for letting other mercenaries do the real reason that they keep little boys around at mercenary camps. Oof. And then, after Gambino becomes injured after a battle, he blames all of his misfortune on Guts, and in the night goes to attack him. And by defending himself, Guts fatally stabs Gambino, now requiring him to flee that very camp he spent his whole life. After spending several years drifting from battlefield to battlefield, it is then when he catches the eye of Griffith. With his long white hair, effeminate face, and bright blue eyes, he is in all effects a pretty boy. But behind that demeanor is a man of ambition, with the skills to back it up. Currently acting as leader of the mercenary group, the Band of the Hawk, he wishes to use military achievements to become a person of renown, using his intelligence and charm to, in his own words, get whatever he wants. And after seeing Guts' display, Griffith knew Guts would be an asset he needed to have. And after winning a duel against Guts, Griffith was able to make him join the Band of the Hawk, though whether he realized it or not, he treated Guts differently than all the other members. To the dismay of Casca, a unit commander in the Band of the Hawk. Casca's reason for being here is that when she was a child, Casca was subjected to the same fate as Guts was, but Griffith gave her the opportunity to reject that fate, causing her to develop an unwavering loyalty towards Griffith, which upon seeing Griffith's sudden interest and camaraderie with Guts, has turned that loyalty into jealousy and an intense rivalry. So with these characters, Guts, Griffith, and Casca, we get this triangle of relationships, not a love triangle mind you, that as the story progresses causes this push and pull, that when one character does something, the others are affected. Now I'm not much of a character analyst, but let's paint a visual of the information that we know so far. Casca admires Griffith, almost to the point of worship, because he helped save Casca from her fate. Griffith, however, has an interest in Guts because he is competent and focused on using his own strength to achieve his goals, even if those goals only amount to winning the current battle. On the other hand, Guts is only following Griffith because of the duel he lost. He wasn't saved by Griffith, so he doesn't hold the same reverence or loyalty towards Griffith that the rest of the Band of the Hawk members do have towards him, which, funnily enough, is why Griffith acts so casually around him. But seeing Griffith's unique relationship with Guts, in spite of his lack of reference, Casca now hates Guts' guts. And while Griffith interacts with Casca quite regularly, but since she's treated the same way as the other Band of the Hawk members, it's not that he doesn't care about her, he just seems indifferent. So where things are at the beginning of our journey, we can see this triangle is quite Griffith-focused, though in a way, this triangular relationship was constructed by Griffith himself, as Griffith asked both Casca and Guts to follow him. So while it makes sense that these relationships, and the entirety of the Band of the Hawk really, are all meant to further Griffith's goals, but he himself doesn't realize how much they mean to him, as the only people who have left this system have died. Whether it was made for control or support, everyone involved is meant to benefit, so imagine being the great architect of this plan, in which you're at the final stage, but then your most influential member decides to willfully leave. One could only imagine what would happen next. Now that I've spent too long thinking about a side tangent based on the plot that should have honestly gotten to in its own video, let's actually talk about the anime again. So why would you want to watch Berserk 1997 when there's a movie trilogy and also a 12-episode anime that covers the exact same story arc but with better graphics? Simply put, the movies and the 12-episode anime cover the highlights of the arc, while the 1997 version has the fullest story behind each character's backgrounds, along with showing the smaller battles and their consequences, which then led to these bigger battles, giving more of a well-rounded experience overall. But once you know the story and the context, the visuals of the later series is quite the treat. But there's one more benefit to the 1997 anime, and that's hearing the original Berserk soundtrack. Man, it's just so nostalgic, but it surprised me too. Next year, this anime is going to be 30 years old. And while I still have an interest of checking out shows from the 90s, 80s, 70s, I don't know if the people of today think the same. So as time goes on and the series we took for granted are becoming forgotten, I'd like to leave these little reminders towards the future generations of how much out there really is worth seeing. And while the story continues after the Golden Age arc in Berserk 2016, I'd honestly recommend checking out the spiritual successor, with similar themes and story feel to what would come next. I give you Claymore